What happens when Hollywood's toughest actor steps into the lion's den of daytime television and completely dismantles one of its most outspoken hosts? Today, we dive into the explosive confrontation that left Joy Behar so humiliated she walked away from The View forever. This wasn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This was the moment when Tom Hardy's razor-sharp wit met Joy Behar's relentless interruptions, and the results were devastating. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment sharing your thoughts on celebrities who can't handle being challenged. The studio lights blazed hot that Tuesday morning as Tom Hardy settled into the familiar guest chair of The View. The legendary British actor, known for his intense roles in Mad Max and The Dark Knight Rises, was there to promote his latest project. What nobody expected was that this routine appearance would make television history. Joy Behar, in her usual spot on the panel, had that familiar glint in her eye. She had done her homework on Hardy, digging up old interviews and controversial quotes, readying what she thought would be another signature takedown. The other hosts, Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, and the rest, could sense the tension building even before cameras started rolling. Joy started with her condescending smile, reserved for guests she planned to interrogate. "Let's talk about your comments on method acting," she began. "You've said some intense things about how far actors should go for their craft. Don't you think that's just a fancy way of saying actors can behave badly?" Hardy leaned back slightly, his piercing blue eyes locking onto Joy with the same intensity he brings to his most demanding roles. A pause hung in the air, just long enough to make everyone hold their breath, before he responded in his gruff, deliberate voice. "Well, Joy, I think there's a difference between commitment to craft and behaving badly. Method acting requires discipline, research, and respect for the process. It's not about tantrums or excuses for poor behavior, which I suspect is what you're implying." The other hosts exchanged glances. This wasn't the usual celebrity softball interview. Hardy had just politely but firmly pushed back, and the studio atmosphere shifted instantly. Joy's smile faltered for a moment before she doubled down, her voice sharp. "Oh, please, Tom. We've all heard the stories about actors claiming they're in character when they're just being difficult. Surely, some of this method acting stuff is just pretentious nonsense." "Pretentious nonsense," Hardy repeated slowly, letting each word land like a punch. "That's an interesting perspective from someone who's made a career out of commenting on subjects they've never experienced. Tell me, Joy, what's your background in performance? What gives you the authority to dismiss techniques actors have used successfully for decades?" The studio went silent, save for the low hum of the cameras. Joy's face flushed red, clearly caught off guard. She was used to asking tough questions, not defending herself. "I've been in this business for over 20 years. Joy shot back, her voice rising slightly. "I think I know a thing or two about what's real and what's self-indulgence." "20 years of what exactly?" Hardy asked, curiosity making the question sting even more. "20 years of sitting behind a desk offering commentary," he continued, "because unless I'm mistaken, your hands-on performance experience is limited. You've done some comedy, some hosting, but you've never had to completely transform yourself for a role, have you?" Whoopi attempted to intervene. "Now, let's not—" But Joy cut her off, pride wounded. "I don't need to climb Mount Everest to know it's tall, Tom. And I don't need to be a method actor to recognize when someone's using it as an excuse." Hardy remained calm, almost predatory now, like a chess master observing a fatal error. "That's actually a perfect analogy, Joy. You don't need to climb Everest to know it's tall. But to critique climbing techniques, you'd need expertise. You'd need knowledge of rope work, oxygen systems, weather patterns. You'd need actual experience, not just opinions." "Are you saying I'm not qualified to have opinions?" Joy demanded. Not at all, Hardy replied smoothly. You're absolutely qualified to have opinions, but there's a difference between having an opinion and making authoritative statements about professional practices you've never engaged in. Surely someone with your experience in media understands that distinction, Hardy said calmly. The other hosts were visibly uncomfortable. Sarah Haynes fidgeted with her cards, while Whoopi shot desperate glances at the producers off camera. This interview had gone completely off script, and Joy was clearly losing control. You know what, Tom? Joy's voice dripped with sarcasm. I think you're proving my point perfectly. All this intellectual posturing, this need to sound so serious and important. That's exactly what I'm talking about when I say method acting is pretentious. Hardy tilted his head slightly, a faint smile forming on his face. Not friendly, but the smile of someone who had just been handed the opening they needed. Intellectual posturing, he said quietly. Joy, I've answered your questions directly and honestly. I've engaged with your criticisms thoughtfully. If that strikes you as pretentious, I think that says more about your comfort level with substantive conversation than it does about my character. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Joy's mouth opened and closed, clearly searching for a comeback. For perhaps the first time in her career, she seemed genuinely speechless. Hardy continued, calm and measured. You asked me about method acting, and I explained it. You challenged my explanation. I questioned your expertise to make that challenge. You called my response pretentious. And now I'm pointing out that dismissing thoughtful dialogue as pretentious might say more about your own limitations. At what point have I been anything other than respectful and direct? The cameras captured every flicker of Joy's discomfort. Her usual confidence had evaporated, replaced by the look of someone who had started a fight they were rapidly losing. This is ridiculous, she muttered, flustered. I'm trying to have a normal conversation here. Are you? Hardy's eyebrows rose slightly. Because from where I sit, it seems you came into this conversation with a predetermined narrative. You wanted to paint method acting as pretentious nonsense, and when I offered a different perspective, you dismissed it without engaging with the substance. That's not a conversation, Joy. That's a lecture, where you've already decided the conclusion. The silence stretched. Joy's face cycled through shades of red as she scrambled internally for control. The other hosts looked like they wanted to vanish into their chairs. Look, I think we're getting a bit off track here, Whoopi finally managed to interject. Actually, Hardy said, turning briefly to her before returning his focus to Joy. I think we're exactly on track. You asked me about method acting, presumably to discuss it. I'm simply trying to understand why you seemed so hostile to the concept without any practical experience. Joy's jaw tightened. She wasn't used to being analyzed on her own show. I'm not hostile to anything. I just think some actors use method acting as an excuse to be difficult on set. Some actors probably do, Hardy agreed calmly. Just like some talk show hosts probably use their platform to attack people they disagree with, instead of having genuine discussions. Should we judge all talk show hosts by the worst examples? The comparison hit like a sledgehammer. Joy's eyes widened, genuinely shocked that her own logic had been turned against her. That's completely different, she protested, though her voice lacked conviction. Is it, though? Hardy asked, genuinely curious. You're saying we should judge method acting by its worst practitioners? Joy asked, trying to regain footing. I'm suggesting we could judge talk show hosting by its worst practitioners, Hardy replied evenly. What makes one valid and the other off limits? Sarah Haynes tried to interject. Maybe we could talk about your new project. But Joy cut her off again, unable to let Hardy's challenge go unanswered. You're twisting my words, Tom. I never said we should judge all method actors by the bad ones. Hardy remained patient, almost educational now, like a professor, correcting a student who hadn't done the reading. Actually, Joy, Your exact words were that method acting is pretentious nonsense, and that actors use it as an excuse to behave badly. That sounds like a pretty broad generalization to me. Would you like me to have the producers replay the tape? The offer rattled Joy. She shifted in her seat, realizing that every word was being recorded for millions to see. I think you're being deliberately obtuse, she shot back defensively. Obtuse? Hardy repeated, a trace of amusement in his voice. Joy, I've been nothing but direct. You made claims about method acting. I questioned those claims. You called my response pretentious. I pointed out that dismissing legitimate discussion as pretentious reflects poorly on the person doing the dismissing. Which part of that is obtuse? Joy was spiraling. Her usual arsenal of interruptions, topic changes, and personal attacks wasn't working against someone who refused to be derailed and seemed genuinely interested in following each line of reasoning to its conclusion. You're playing word games? She accused. Even as she spoke, it sounded weak. Joy, Hardy said, raising his eyebrows. Words are how we communicate ideas. If you're not comfortable with precise language, perhaps television isn't the right medium for you. The implication was devastating. The other hosts audibly gasped, and the production team off-camera frantically gestured at each other. Joy's face went pale, then flushed a deeper red. How dare you suggest I don't belong in television? I've been successful in this industry longer than you've been acting. Have you, though? Hardy asked simply. The question carried more weight than a long-winded accusation. What exactly do you consider success? He continued. Because from where I sit, your approach to interviewing seems designed to generate conflict rather than insight. You ask loaded questions, interrupt guests trying to give thoughtful answers, and then attack them when they don't respond the way you want. Is that success or just noise? Hardy's assessment hit with surgical precision. Viewers could see him demonstrating his point in real time, refusing to be interrupted or derailed, making his critique all the more powerful. I ask tough questions because that's what journalists do, Joy shot back, her voice shaking. Journalists, Hardy repeated, calm but piercing. Joy, when did you last break a story? Do investigative reporting? When did you last do anything besides offer opinions about other people's work? Because what I'm seeing isn't journalism. It's someone who built a career on being argumentative, picking fights with anyone who won't play along. The distinction between journalism and punditry was crystal clear, and Hardy had highlighted that Joy was firmly in the latter category while claiming the credibility of the former. Whoopi tried again to intervene. Tom, maybe we should... But Joy was past saving, her pride wounded, her professional competence questioned. She faced the humiliating realization that she was losing an argument on her own show, in front of millions. You know what? She snapped, her voice rising. I don't have to sit here and be lectured by some actor who thinks he's smarter than everyone else. Actually, Hardy said quietly, you do have to sit there. This is your show. I'm your guest. You invited me here, presumably to discuss my work, and now you're upset I'm not performing the role you wrote for me in your head. But here's the thing, Joy. I'm not performing for you. This is a conversation between two adults, and if you can't handle that, maybe the problem isn't with me. The words landed like a final blow. Joy sat frozen for a moment, clearly processing that she had just been completely outmaneuvered by someone who had never raised his voice, never been disrespectful, and never stopped treating her like a professional, even as he systematically dismantled her credibility. This is unbelievable, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. What's unbelievable? Hardy asked gently. That someone disagreed with you? That someone asked you to defend your positions instead of just accepting them? That someone treated your questions seriously enough to give honest answers instead of promotional sound bites? Which part exactly is unbelievable to you? Joy's mouth opened and closed several times. No words came out. For someone who had built her career on always having something to say, The silence was deafening. Hardy leaned forward slightly, his voice almost gentle. "Joy, I came here to talk about my work. You decided to turn it into an attack on method acting, presumably because you thought it would make good television. But when I engaged with your criticism seriously, you got upset. The question you need to ask yourself is this: do you actually want to have conversations? Or do you just want to perform anger for ratings?" The question hung in the air like a challenge that couldn't be ignored. Joy stared at Hardy, her breathing shallow, struggling with the realization that she had no good answer. The "perform anger for ratings" comment struck at the heart of everything she had built her career on, and everyone in the studio knew it. "That's not," Joy started, then stopped. "I don't perform anything. I give my honest opinions." "Do you, though?" Hardy's tone was almost sympathetic, which somehow made it worse. "Because it seems to me you came into this conversation with a script. Attack method acting, get me defensive, create drama for the highlight reels. But when I didn't follow your script, when I actually engaged with your questions seriously, you got frustrated. That suggests the conversation itself was never the point." Joy's own hands shook visibly. She looked around the table at her co-hosts, searching for backup, but they avoided eye contact. Even Whoopi, usually quick to defend her colleagues, seemed buried in her notes. "I asked the questions that viewers want answered," Joy said weakly. "Do they, though?" Hardy pressed. "Do viewers really want to watch you attack guests? Or do you just assume they do because conflict gets ratings? Because from where I sit, this doesn't feel like journalism or entertainment. It feels like bullying." The word hit Joy like a physical blow. Her face went white, stunned. No one had ever called her a bully on television before, and the accuracy of it was devastating. "I am not a bully," she whispered, but even she didn't sound convinced. "Aren't you?" Hardy asked. "You use your platform to attack people who can't really fight back without looking bad. You interrupt them when they try to explain themselves. You dismiss their responses without listening. You make personal attacks when your arguments fall apart. What would you call that behavior if you saw it anywhere else?" Joy's breathing became rapid. The full weight of Hardy's assessment was sinking in. Everything he said was true, and worse, millions were watching her realize it in real time. "This is my show," she said desperately. "I have a right to ask tough questions." "Absolutely," Hardy agreed immediately. "You have every right to ask tough questions, but I also have the right to give tough answers, and your guests have the right to be treated with basic respect, even when you disagree with them. The problem isn't that you ask hard questions, Joy. The problem is that you seem to think asking hard questions means you shouldn't have to answer any." Sarah Haynes made one last desperate attempt to intervene. "Maybe we should take a commercial break." But Joy was beyond saving now. Something had broken inside her, a carefully constructed wall between her public persona and the private self-doubt she rarely allowed anyone to see. "No," she said, her voice cracking. "No, I want to finish this, Tom. You think you're so smart, so superior, but you don't know anything about what it's like to work in this industry as a woman. You don't know what I've had to do to survive." Hardy's expression softened genuinely for the first time. "You're absolutely right. I don't know what that's like. And I'm not trying to dismiss the real challenges you faced. But Joy, none of that justifies treating people badly. Being a woman in a tough industry is a reason to fight for better standards, not an excuse to abandon them." The compassion in his voice seemed to shatter something in Joy completely. Tears formed in her eyes. Her professional mask slipped entirely. "You don't understand," she whispered, tired and defeated. "If I'm not the tough one, if I'm not the one asking the hard questions, then what am I? What's my value?" "That's the wrong question," Hardy said gently. "Your value isn't in being tough or confrontational. Your value is in being curious, in helping people understand complex issues, in creating space for genuine dialogue. But you can't do any of that if you're more interested in performing conflict than having conversations. Joy was crying openly now, and the cameras captured every moment. The other hosts looked mortified, witnessing the complete breakdown of a colleague's professional identity live on air. "I can't do this anymore," Joy said suddenly, standing from the table. "I can't sit here and pretend this is working when it's not. Tom, you're right about all of it. And I hate that you're right. And I hate that you've made me see it. And I hate that I've built my whole career on being something I'm apparently not very good at." The studio was silent, save for the soft click of her microphone being removed. Hardy started to stand, but Joy raised her hand. "Don't," she said. "Don't try to make this better. Don't try to be nice about it. You came here to promote your work, and instead you've shown me, and everyone watching, exactly who I really am. And the worst part? You did it without being cruel. You did it just by refusing to play along with my game." She turned to the camera, makeup streaked with tears, but her voice steadier than it had been all morning. "You know what, viewers? Tom's right. I've been performing anger for ratings. I've been treating guests like props in my personal drama instead of human beings with something valuable to say. And I'm tired of it. I'm tired of being the person who attacks people for having thoughtful responses to legitimate questions." Hardy remained standing, torn between comforting her and respecting her space. "Joy, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," she interrupted. "Because this is the first honest conversation I've had on this show in years, and it took a guest calling me out to make it happen. That's not journalism. That's not even good television. That's just sad." She glanced at her co-hosts,